All right, let's make some sourdough. Let's figure out how to do this. First thing, I had fed my starter last night. I have been keeping the starter alive for months. It's nice and thick and honestly smells pretty gross, which is kind of the goal because it's yeast that's eating. I fed it last night before I went to bed. It's about 9 in the morning, 8:30 in the morning. So it is nice and active. It is not completely risen. Sometimes it gets all the way up to here. This is like right before it peaks. That's actually kind of ideal because that way it's still hungry. And I'll do a separate video about how to keep track of your starter and keep it alive, but this is what it starts with. Basically got a mixing bowl, some bread flour, some stuff that I'm gonna put in there, some salt. Anyway, let's see if I can set this up. So basically step one, you just dump in most of this. You see how thick and kind of gross this looks? Yeah, and there's still a little bit left in there, and that's fine because I need to keep my starter alive. Okay, and then to this, I'm going to add, right now it's winter. I don't know if you guys can actually see the snow outside. In the winter, I feed it about 1.5 cups of warm water. In the summer, I can usually get away with like almost 2. It's going to kind of vary from season to season, so give me a second to get water. I have done variations of this where sometimes I substitute some of the water out for stuff like orange juice, or if you're making a focaccia, you can add in like 1/4 cup of olive oil. I did that literally last week. But at this point, basically you're going to have your focaccia, your starter and your water in here. And I own one of these. You can get away with just a whisk or a spatula, but these things are kind of handy. This inner shape can be all sorts of different shapes, but the idea is you can basically mix up your starter and it goes in between everything. And this isn't going to completely dissolve because it's not actually soluble, but you're going to basically mix it together until it's as consistent as you can get it. And there's a couple different philosophies on how to flavor your starter. I am a firm believer that if you add seasoning later, it's not going to get as evenly distributed. So I tend to do all of my seasoning in the beginning. So this is my one chance to get flavors in this. I have tried all sorts of variations. I'm going to do what is my favorite here. I'm a big fan of citrus in this. Orange zest, lemon zest, stuff like that works really well. I did a lemon and thyme bread the other day. So literally you just zesting an orange. And the idea is it gets the oils in there. The oils are what give it the flavor. Yes, you can put orange juice in, but honestly, anything that's sugar-based, your starter is going to eat that. So sometimes I put honey in here. You can put honey in at this point. And my logic is the honey will help grow the starter. And, any honey that doesn't get digested, I guess, will add flavor, but for the most part, it's going to get eaten. So as long as you've got a good, healthy starter, you don't need a sugar source, but in terms of flavors, the oils are not going to get digested, and the little flakes of orange zest are going to incorporate flavor without getting used up by the starter. If you don't get every little bit, that's fine. Just get what you can. And then obviously this orange is totally fine. You can eat it later. Okay. I've heard varying amounts of salt. I have a don't know if you can actually read it. 1 teaspoon measurement. I usually put in at least 2, sometimes 3. Kind of depends on what I'm feeling that day. I'm gonna go with 3 this time. I've done all the way up to 4. It all grows just fine. I'll make sure I mix that up. My goal is usually to get everything as evenly distributed as possible. As far as seasoning goes, herbs work really well here. I did fresh rosemary and orange zest with olive oil and made a focaccia literally like 3 days ago. My favorite go-to answer is cinnamon. You'll note the lack of measuring. I've kind of learned that you almost can't overpower this. But it just adds a subtle background flavor. This is cardamom. I'm fully aware that there's different types of cardamom. This is just stuff I bought at the store. I'm sure if you can get good cardamom, you will notice a difference. And then this is cloves. So cinnamon, cardamom, and cloves with orange zest is kind of my go-to favorite style of bread. Anyway, mix this up. It doesn't have to be perfect because I'm about to add a bunch of flour and it's also going to mix it up. But, okay. And I use bread flour. You'll notice that it's 12.7. You can get away with all-purpose flour, but it's going to have a lower protein content and you may have to adjust your water levels. I tried a whole wheat, which is 13.7, and that does not work well. There may be a way around it, but I would recommend going with bread flour. King Arthur is a good brand, but you don't have to use it. And to this, I'm basically going to add a total of 3 cups. You may have to adjust this, obviously, depending on how much water you put in, depending on how humid it is. You're literally dealing with a living creature here. Your starter is alive. So how much food it needs is going to vary. 3 cups tends to work pretty well for me. So I'm using a 1/2 cup scoop in case you're thinking I'm miscounting. That is now a total of a whole cup. And I'm going to stir that in. Okay, it doesn't have to be perfect at this point because I'm about to stir in more flour and then mix it also. For what it's worth, it smells absolutely amazing right now. So that was 1 cup, 1 1/2, 2 cups. We're shooting for 3 total. So you combine this. This helps get mixed everything. Everything mixes really nicely. You'll notice I don't ever really have to knead this dough. So if you're somebody who makes yeasted bread where you're used to having to knead everything, this is about as close to kneading as we get. We are going to have to do stretches, but this is mostly just being patient. You just need to have lots of resting and time for this to proof, which I typically do in the oven. I forgot to do this before this, but I will, and it won't be part of the video, is I typically just boil some water, and then I just put it in the oven. So I don't turn the oven on, obviously. I don't want to cook this plastic bowl. But you just need a warm, humid environment for it to rise. So that's 2 1/2 cups. And that's 3. So for right now, that's really all the flour I need to use. At the end, when it comes time to like put the bread onto a parchment paper and scoring and stuff like that, I'll use a little bit more flour. But as far as mixing ingredients, this is pretty much the process. You literally just want to combine this, which this tool is great for. You want to combine this until there is no dry flour on the surface. And you'll notice as I pull it apart, there's still wet parts. Sorry, I'm blocking the light. There's wet parts, but most of it looks really, really dry. So this part takes a little bit of, if you have a stand mixer, this is kind of the time to do that, I guess. I don't own a stand mixer because honestly, until this year, I never made stuff like bread. This is literally the last point in the process where you can adjust anything. So if it looks too watery, you can add more flour. If it looks too dry, you can add more water. It's actually looking more dry than I'm used to, but we'll assume that it's gonna be fine. This was an impulse decision to film myself making bread, so hopefully this one turns out. And you can use your hands at this point. You can knead it, but you don't have to. Trying to tear it apart so that I can get to the wet parts in the middle. And I remember back when I first started doing this, I remember being like really diligent about scraping down the sides and making sure that like every little flake got in. It turns out that it doesn't really matter a whole lot. Anyway, it is now mostly wet, and if you look at it, it's pretty consistent. Everything's come together. I'm not worried about like doing the window pane test and stretching it and kneading it until I get nice clear things, because honestly I'm going to keep stretching it. But yeah, at this point I'm going to take this, cover it with a moist towel, a warm wet towel, and then put it with boiling water in the oven and leave it for 1 hour. And the next video will show what I do after that. Thanks.